talastasan. Magpakilala na lang po at kung maaari maging may kailangan pagtatanong sapagkat meron lang po tayong pangalan ng ibang minuto kung papayagan po tayo ng TWSC para po sa talastasan.
Hello, ako po si Mr. Rafael, instructor sa Sociology Departamento. Yung karamihan po ng audience dito, estudyante ko. Kasi nasa social institutions kami na class. Tapos sabi ko pumunta sila dito, akala ko magkakaroon kami ng pag-asa, pero parang hindi pala. No? Then, joke lang. Yung ano ko lang, no? Kasi karamihan ng mga pinopropose na institutional reform, parang nasa policy area, no? Alam naman natin na yung mga social institutions, hindi lang naman policy yung ano niya, may cultural and social ano siya. And an example of a policy reform na policy-led reform ng institution ay sa ARM, kung saan nagpasa ng policy pero hindi inayos yung sa social and cultural dimensions. Ngayon, gusto ko lang yan na kasi kung puro policy reform, parang feeling ko parang wala kami magagawa. Parang lahat tayo nasa mercy ng kung sino man ang nasa policy sector, no? So ano yung mga pwede kayang nating gawin para may suportahan yung mga sinasabi na policy reform para hindi naman yung parang pakiramdam natin puro yung mga tao nasa gobyerno lang ang may pwedeng gawin at ano yung mga pwedeng gawin ng mga estudyante natin na nandito o kaya tayo mga nandito sa academic community para ma-improve or mapalakas yung institutional reform na pinopropose nila.
Kung meron muna akong tatanong bago natin pasagutin ang ating mga tagapagsalita. Kung wala, maybe my response si Professor Arugay at si Professor Lara.
Salamat sa tanong. Importante po yun dahil hindi dapat lamang. Ang problema kasi minsan dahil it seems like you require a lot of knowledge or certain information on how political institutions work before you engage in such conversation or discourse. Bilang isang nag-aaral ng politika ng ibang bansa, nakita ko, for example, yung evidence ko, Latin America, kasi po yung lugar ng mundo na napag-aralan ko ng kaunti. Yung kanilang mga policy and institutional reform exercises, bumaba po sa grassroots. Hindi po yan binigay na proseso para sa politiko na gawin. No? Ang sabi nga ng rallying cry ng mga reform, ng mga gusto ng reform, we must take away the reform process from the people who needs to be reformed. So, ang problema kasi minsan, yung mismong kailangan ng reforma, sila yung nagtataas ng kamay na kaming bahala sa reforma, no? And what Latin American countries did, like Bolivia and Ecuador, is to totally take out the process and go to the basic level, which are social groups, those that have been marginalized. No? Sa Bolivia po, 70% is indigenous, but none of them have participated in constitution building and institutional reform until Evo Morales became president. So, meron pong role pwede pong isali, hindi ibig sabihin na hindi mo naman alam ang difference ng presidential parliamentary, hindi ka pwedeng sumama. No? Dahil po yung representation, wala naman pong kailangan na requirement yan, kundi rationality, di ba? Yun yung essence ng political representation. Kahit sino naman po pwede maging representante ng taong bayan. Dahil pare-pareho naman po tayo may rational faculty. But to participate lends credibility and legitimacy to the process. So, meron pong trabaho, meron pong obligasyon, meron pong responsibilidad, at may role yung different groups. Kaya sa akin importante yung that the process is also the outcome. Whatever outcome of the constitutional change process that we will have to go through, the process is as important. Ibig sabihin, kung hindi dumaan sa participation ng grassroots na alam nila yung konstitusyon na i-adapt, alam nila yung mga issues ng konstitusyon. Sa Venezuela po, yung mga Venezolanos, meron silang maliit na libro sa kanilang bulsa At yung libro na po yun ay yung kanilang konstitusyon. At dala-dala po nila yun kahit saan. Because may buy-in kasi nakisama sila dun sa proseso ng pagbabago. Kung iniwan po natin yan sa politiko, it's totally divorced from reality. Kasi mukhang iba yung mundo nila at mukhang iba yung mundo natin. At kung sila yung magbabago din ng konstitusyon, what will prevail is their own view of the political world. Which I think, as a political scientist, iba naman po yata yung mundo natin dun sa mundo nila.
Can I just answer? You mentioned the bunch of moros political. What happened, for example, in cases like where the Constitution does not matter to them, for example, where even modern democratic institutions, by the way, I use institutions in the way North uses it, not school systems. So I separate it from the notion of organizations, okay? A lot of things happen in Mindanao that pertain to institutional reform that people actually do on a daily basis. They don't need to go to the central state. They don't even need to go to the local state. And a lot of problems of welfare and conflict are resolved by actually people coming up with institutions that work, rule systems that work. In, for example, adjudicating conflict, settling disputes in land, in dividing, for example, or rather allocating land for different families, providing food and support for widows or the sick and infirm. Good case in point is the existence of traditional institutions like blood money that's been used repeatedly as a very effective way to stem a string of conflict. I think I spoke about this last year. In certain places in Mindanao, blood money is important. And local government officials have actually used blood money to be able to prevent the further spread of conflict. Now, here is a local government official that by its very nature as a political animal should adhere to constitutional rules, right? He's a representative of the state. But he actually adheres or is willing to carry rules that are not properly zoned, but are stemming from, let's say, the Quran, because he's Muslim, or stemming from clan institutions. Okay, so he uses part of the internal revenue allotment now, puts it into a kitty that is called blood money. Pag may napatay, bibigyan niya ng pera, sasabihin niya, huwag mo nang habulin yung pumatay sa'yo. Ako nang bahala doon. Ako ang hahabol. It's proven effective in places like Upi, Buldon, Libarila Complex. Ang nangyayari, din yung pamilya maghihintay. I-restrain nila yung mga barila. Hintay nila sa patunayan mo at anyway, nabayaran nagkaroon ng compensation. Okay. Anong mali doon? Look at constitutional rules. If you look at good governance, mali yun corruption yun. Ginamit mong IRA for blood money. Kaya may kasabihan doon, yeah, good governance pero bad results. Would you rather have that or would you have bad governance because he uses his IRA for blood money with good results in terms of stemming conflict? This is how people can work. This is how students, the young, can actually play an important role. It is by looking at the immediate environment where they are and start adhering, understanding the mix of traditional and modern institutions that are all around you. All around you. The only thing you need to do is to establish and to find out which works. Develop hybrids. I know of some young people, organizations in Mindanao, UNIPAT, for example, who develop hybrids. Hybrids meaning a mix of Quranic institutions mixed with clan institutions and mixed with democratic institutions. And they found it very effective in settling issues of cattle rustling. That's the way to go, I think. Kasi, tingin ko, problema is, if they spend their time running after Congress, no, then that's when the alienation comes in. I agree with you na tama, everyone should be involved in national politics, di ba? The change of the Constitution, the change of government, the new government. But in the first instance, di ba, you'd rather be involved muna in the community where you live, the families that are special, that are very important for you. And you can do that.
Just to reinforce the point of Dr. Lara, kasi nga po dahil ang demokrasya o yung regime quality ng Pilipinas, katulad ng mga ibang bansa sa Asia at sa Latin America, mahina pa, tama yung coexistence of formal and informal institutions. Meron pong existing evidence that sometimes informal institutions, even if they are deviations from the supposed good institutions or yung formalistic institutions, sometimes the informal either is being accommodated or is acting as a substitute in the meantime, kasi nga yung institutional prerequisites o yung prerequisites for a mature democracy wala pa, nagkakaroon ng openings eh. So that's why I stress the role of informality in the sense that we cannot be truly formal in Philippine politics because we know a lot happens outside the formality, outside formal legal institutions. So any attempt to change the constitution always has to know the context. Ang konteksto ng Pilipinas, marami pong gray areas, marami pong mga proseso kung saan yung traditional, yung informal, coexist with what is supposed to be on paper. And any intelligent supposed design needs to recognize this and needs to address ano ba yung pwede muna nating pagsamahin sa ngayon, lalo na't hindi pa tayo ganun ka-tibay na demokrasya. What works in the meantime? Hindi natin sinasabi na papalitan niya yung formal at institutional, but while it works now, while we are still being in transition, maybe that is something that could be accommodated.
Thank you very much. I am tempted to ask, to have another round of questions, but I was told that we have to finish exactly at 4. But maybe if you have questions, you can approach our speakers after the forum. But I also am asked to give a summary. I wanted to do it in English because it's quite difficult to do it in Filipino as well. I think we are made to believe in certain things, like for example, that we are the democracy and that we have peace here in the Philippines. Pero in the presentation of our speakers, we are told that while there are changes, for example, in our democracy, there are advances, it seems to lack development. And therefore, Professor Arugay is telling us that maybe we have to consider changing some of our electoral systems and how we select our president and the members of our legislature. We also have to think about probably instituting constitutional courts, have a second look at campaign finance, and maybe introduce direct democracy mechanisms. Dr. Lara is telling us that yes, while we have, while there are developments in the peace process between the government and the more Islamic Liberation Front, we can see that there's a rise in horizontal violence. There's a problem with the GPH, CDP, MDA, and their peace process, and he's telling us that we have to prepare ourselves for a long, hot summer of conflict. Kaya siguro importante yung sinasabi ni Professor Lara kanina, we must be able to manage expectations because administrations in the 2016 elections will be told we will be promised a lot of things. So probably it would be wise to manage expectations. Lastly, with the recommendation of Professor Wali of having an agenda that is led by academics, I think what's important also in response to Dr. Arugay and Dr. Lara is the understanding of the context. I think it tells us a lot about what to expect and how we look at reality. Pareho nilang nilabas yung kanina. So please join me in thanking our speakers and our actors, Professor Arugay, si Dr. Lara, at si Professor Wali.